So, let the championship officially begin. The host's words called for the cheers from the crowds. They began cheering for their specific champions. Hey, do you know who's going to win? Ain't that obvious enough for everyone to see? It is obviously Mad Lion. Look there. It seems that there are a few fresh meats this time. Hee hee. I can't wait to see how they get trained in the ring. Do you think there's a newbie who can win the championship today? Stop daydreaming there. Since when had newbies win the competition? Only those that had been here a few times have a chance of winning. What daydreaming? It's already almost nighttime. Then stop night dreaming. Can people control their dreaming time? Just stop sleeping. I'm talking with you. How am I sleeping? Figure that out yourself. As the crowd was still clamoring, the host spoke again. Now, to the first part, we always talk about the rules of the championship as there are always some newbies or some with short memory. Ha ha ha. The crowd laughed at the host's words. It wasn't long before they forgot about the arguments that they were having with their friends or neighbors not long ago. Now, the first rule of the competition is that, by the end of today, there will only be 8 fighters remaining. This is to ensure that the fights tomorrow would only be epic. Another thing to take note of would be that each fighter has 3 fights. 3 wins and you'll proceed. These people will fight once again. The same thing as before, 3 fights, 3 wins and you'll proceed. Although the rules seemed harsh, at the end of the day, they only wanted the strongest fighters. So, if one was unlucky to encounter the strongest opponents in all the 3 matches, then he was bound to lose. Furthermore, there was nothing like 3 chances. Once you lost a single match, you would disappear from the competition. After all, the prerequisite of entering the next round was to win 3 matches out of 3. So, even if you win the first 2 matches, as long as you lose the last match, you would be disqualified. The rules of losing the match are simple. You lose if you stay on the ground to the count of 10, you're kicked out of the ring or knocked unconscious. Please, don't blame us if you have much vitality in your body and you have much pain tolerance in that you're beaten to death without admitting defeat. Remember, all of you who are fighting in this arena have signed the agreement contract that if you die in the ring due to your stubbornness, this has nothing to do with the ultimate arena. These rules were directed to the fighters, and they could hear them clearly as the speakers in the changing room transmitted the host's voice to them. Since there are many fighters but less time, each fight will only have 10 minutes. If the 10 minutes are over and there's no winner, both the fighters will be disqualified. After talking about a few more things in 5 minutes, the host finally stopped and looked at the VIP room. The moment that he did so, a loud sound of a gong echoed in the arena. Of course, although it was loud, it wasn't deafening at all. Now, the fights are going to start at this moment. The draws are random. Nothing is planned. Let me stop my big mouth from running any further and let the first draw of the matches begin. As soon as his words faded, a screen appeared at the arena's center. It was in form of a box, and it was a projection of a screen and not a real screen. Names of the fighters began appearing one by one on the screen projection before being replaced by another. Not long after that, a name was displayed on the screen. It was none other than Dingo. The moment that the name appeared, the crowd cheered. From their chattering, it could be known that this Dingo had been here a few times already. His performance wasn't bad as he was able to make it to the last round of the preliminaries in the previous 2 months. It was just that he had met some tough guys in the last elimination matches and was eliminated. Not long after the host shouted the name that was displayed on the screen, a bald-headed man came from the changing room. His steps were quite confident as if he was going to win the match already. When he appeared, the crowd cheered a lot. They knew him and thus, he had accumulated a good number of fans already. As the names on the projection rolled, another name was displayed. This time, it was J.K. Silver. When this name was displayed, there were no loud cheers as those when Dingo had been selected. The reason behind this was that the person this time was a newbie. What a bummer. I was expecting a good fight. It turns out that it's a newbie going to fight. How disappointing. Anyway, what's the use of the fight when we already know the results? That newbie has to surrender as fast as possible so that we can watch another match. You guys don't know a thing. There are newbies that end up winning in their first debut. Heh, that only happens in novels and TV shows where the MC is so superpowered. As the crowd talked, Jack walked out of the changing room calmly. Although he had expected to test his maximum strength here, he was quite disappointed the moment that he saw the fighters here. The way that they carried themselves already told him that they didn't know how to fight. Well, that was to a standard of a professional combatant like him. Now that there was no challenge here, he decided that his reason for participating this time would be to finish the system mission and get the good things after he won the bet. Although the crowd couldn't see his upper part of the face, they could definitely see his blue eyes as well as the special silver hair. Plus, the well-carved chin. They could already guess that Jack was handsome. But that made their impression of him fall further. According to them, a pretty boy had decided to come to a ring where men fought. This was no different from suicide. Jack never cared about what they were thinking and stepped onto the ring after following the stairs. Although he could simply jump onto the ring, there was no need for him to be so showy. He walked forward and stood in front of Dingo. The two stood opposite each other and gave the crowd such a contrasting image. Although Jack did have a good body, in front of the bulky and tall Dingo, Jack was no different from a small boy in front of an adult. Such contrasting difference made the crowd boo at Jack. And at the same time, bets were placed and most of them were on Dingo. Hee hee, Edwin, do you think that kid of yours can win this round? Austin laughed as he asked sarcastically. Edwin looked at him as if he was an idiot. If Jack had agreed to bet with Austin for a stake that was worth more than $1 billion, he must have confidence in his abilities. As a result, Edwin believed that Jack would definitely be able to win this round. Although he was a little uncertain, he still believed that. To prove that, he placed a bet worth $100 million on Jack. The moment that he did this, the other big bosses that were present in the room couldn't help but look at Edwin with surprise in their eyes. After all, this was the first time that they had seen Edwin make such a bet that he was sure to lose. Now, they thought that Edwin might have made the bet because he was provoked by Austin. So, they simply shook their heads at this. There was nothing that could be done as once a person placed a bet, there would be no refunds. Ha ha ha, it seems that you're confident in that little chap of yours. Just look at the difference between the two. That boy is skinny while Dingo has muscles on him. Do you think that boy can compete? At this time, Austin was no longer calling Jack a brat. After all, if Jack could give out $1 billion worth of assets when he lost his bet, must have some background. But even so, he still referred to Jack as a boy. Body size doesn't show the strength. Edwin said indifferently. Heh, why have I not seen a situation where the thin fighters win against the bulky ones? Austin sneered. Maybe you're blind not to know that you're an example. You have a bigger mouth than me, but you've never won against me. Edwin replied with a cold smile. What are you two talking about? At this time, a man in a green and yellow suit asked. Just something small, Linus. This guy doesn't know when to quit and thinks that he can still change the tide even after he'd lost. Edwin smiled as he replied. You're the one that doesn't know when to quit. Look at the two. You already know that your boy has no chance of winning, and yet you still placed $100 million on him. Austin retorted. Linus looked at the ring and smiled as he looked at Jack. He could see that although Jack was standing in front of Dingo, he didn't seem nervous at all. In fact, it was like he was ignoring the opponent and thought that he wasn't going to fight. Just from this and knowing about Edwin's character, Linus smiled and placed his bet as well. And he placed it on Jack. Jack's current odds were at 1 minute and 3.5 seconds. When the others saw Linus place the same bet as Edwin, they were surprised. But Edwin wasn't that much surprised as he knew that Linus wasn't someone that bet on just anybody. He must have noticed something. Dark lines appeared on Austin's forehead when he saw this. He was just about to speak when the sound of a gong echoed again, indicating the start of the match. On the ring, Jack looked at Dingo nonchalantly, completely ignoring his provocative gaze. After all, if this guy was not as good as Scarred Tiger, how could Jack even have time to waste on him? The earlier he finished the competition, the earlier he would receive his rewards. So, Jack was simply waiting for the bell to ring to indicate the start of the match. Jack was quite doubtful about that considering that it was going to be a one-way beating. It was not that Jack was arrogant or disdainful, it was just that it was the truth. After all, with his current capabilities, he had yet to meet his match. The 5 minutes of wait was to let those that wanted to bet to place their bets. There was data about the two in the ring being displayed on the screens in the air. Of course, The information was only the basic ones that they had given during their registration. Dingo's information showed his performance during the past 4 months that he had been here. On the other hand, Jack's part showed that he was a newbie and this would be his first match. In other words, he had never fought in a competition before, and this would be his first debut. For this exact reason, Jack's odds were high, and there were even less people betting on him to win the match. And these were those that wanted to try betting on the dark horse. If it just so happened that Jack was the dark horse, it was a sure bet that they would make a fortune. When Dingo saw that Jack didn't even seem to care about his presence at all, he felt that he was being looked down upon. As a man with his own pride, how could he allow some nobody to tarnish and mess with it? He has been fighting in this ring for 4 months now, and 2 of those months he had been able to get to the last round of the preliminaries. This time, he was trying to go for the chance of reaching the top 8. But in the first round, there was a small opponent that didn't put him into his eyes. How could he not be angry? He looked at Jack as he said, "Listen here, kid. You better surrender as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to make sure that I break each and every bone of yours." His words weren't said in a low voice, but in one that those that were closer at a range of 100 meters could hear him. And with the host being closer with the mic, although it wasn't loud, the crowd could hear these words clearly. As a result, a commotion rose among the crowd. There were some that wanted Jack to give up already, while others felt their blood boiling at the thought of how Jack's bones would be broken. When Jack heard Dingo's words, he frowned. He once again wondered, what's up with people nowadays? They just can't shut their big mouths at all. They simply throw around their words without thinking or knowing about who they were facing. Or could those who came to this arena be barbarians that didn't like to use their brains? Seeing that Jack only frowned but said nothing, Dingo wasn't pleased at all. He spoke again. "Since it seems that you're so much reluctant, I will have to teach you a good lesson. I'll remove that mask off your face after I strip the clothes off of your body. I want to see how you're going to face your girl in the future." There was a sinister smile on his face as he gazed at Jack. He was sure that he could be able to do these things as long as he overwhelmed Jack. And, although he'd witnessed Jack pushing Scarred Tiger's hand to the side easily, he simply thought that it was due to Scarred Tiger not being prepared and not using his full strength. Furthermore, he would attack Jack and absolutely no chance to surrender in the ring. The moment that the ladies amongst the spectators heard his words, they blushed shyly. But there was a glint of expectation in their eyes. There were even some of them that were shouting in support of Dingo's words, supporting this action. Jack's eyes turned cold the moment that he heard Dingo's words and the cheers from the crowd. His lips twisted into a cold smile as he gazed at Dingo. "Since you're so much into embarrassing me, it won't hurt to embarrass you too, right?" Jack thought to himself. Although he wanted to make sure that he finished the fight faster, there was no way that he could stop punishing someone. Using 3 to 5 minutes to embarrass someone wasn't that much to him. He could afford it.
Young.
At this moment, the gong sound echoed again. And with that, the host spoke. "The betting period is over. Now, it's time to witness the match. In the count of 3, 2, 1 fight." The moment that the host started counting, he had already began retreating from the duo. By the time that he said 1, he was already closer to the edge of the ring. And upon shouting the word "fight," he had already turned heels and fled from the ring. His movements insinuated a round of laughter and mockery from the spectators. It wasn't that he was being chased from the ring. It was just that there was a time that the host, who was the referee as well, was caught up in a fight between 2 fighters. In the end, he was crippled after he received a fierce kick on his left leg. Nowadays, those that were hosting the competition made sure to rush out of the ring before the fights began. They always judged the match from out of the ring. Although it wasn't that easy, it was safer. The moment that the host allowed the fight to begin, Dingo wasted no time at all and attacked Jack by throwing a punch. With his frame, the fist was big and heavy. If this smashed into an unprepared man, it would definitely break a few bones if the ones that were hit were the ribs. Seeing the punch coming his way, Jack decided not to counter it at all. Instead, the moment that the punch got closer to him, he simply shifted to the side slightly, avoiding the punch. After that, he didn't move again. He simply stood there as he looked at Dingo. On the other hand, Neither Dingo nor the spectating crowd had expected that Dingo would miss a stagnant target. Of course, this was the way that most of the spectators thought. But for Dingo and the other fighters and the big bosses with sharp eyes, they had noticed that Jack moved a little to avoid the punch. The movement was well-timed and precise. Although surprised, Dingo threw another punch. But the result was still the same. He still missed again and again. What the heck is this Dingo doing? Does he think that we're in a circus? Maybe he thinks so, considering that the way that he's attacking is like an angry and violent monkey that is attacking without a plan. Can this match be rigged? How can that be possible? I don't think that I have ever seen the championship matches being rigged. You guys sure are idiots. Just look at Dingo's expression. It shows that he seems frustrated that his punches are missing. Look at that pot's bottom face of his. It looks like he's going to burst from anger. Now that you mention it, I can see that. It seems that there's something wrong with this J.K. Silver. Heh, country bumpkins that can't judge what they're seeing. Can't you see Silver? They're making small movements? He's dodging the punches with the most subtle movements that you careless bunch aren't observing. Your sister is a careless bunch. Do you think I didn't see it? It was just that I wasn't saying anything. Whatever, just suit yourself. Dingo, on the other hand, upon seeing that his punches couldn't touch Jack, he immediately resorted to throwing kicks. He was someone that had been in tens of fights even before joining the arena. So, he knew how to react. Although he was angry, he didn't dare to be careless at all. He threw a kick that formed an arc heading towards Jack's head. This time, Jack knew that he would have to make a slightly bigger movement. So, as the kick approached from his left, although from other people's perspective it was fast, in his eyes, the kick wasn't fast at all. He simply bent his body backwards, allowing the foot that was set on hitting his head pass before raising his body. Surprisingly, ever since the fight began, Jack hadn't moved from his spot. Only his upper part of the body moved, but his feet remained on the same spot. Upon missing, Dingo threw another kick. But the result was still the same. Jack easily dodged his attacks. This made him frustrated in that his anger began clouding his thoughts. He decided to go for Jack's legs next. It was also at this moment that Jack thought that he had played with Dingo enough. He thought that it was time for him to eliminate him. As the legs swept towards his feet, he took a few steps backwards, evading the sweep. And just like that, Jack continued evading the attacks while moving. Dingo, on the other hand, had already gone crazy as he attacked without thinking. His mind was only thinking of pummeling Jack to a pulp. He jumped forward as he threw a punch towards Jack's face. But suddenly, Jack moved 2 steps to the side. Since Dingo had struck forward with great momentum, he failed to stop himself when he found that his body lacked somewhere to step on. And before long, face first, he dropped out of the ring. It was only when he felt the pain of dropping face first from a height of 1 meter and great force that he regained his senses. And at this moment, the while arena was silent, nobody speaking as they couldn't accept the results that they were seeing. But they couldn't be blamed, as even Dingo himself found it hard to accept the fact that he'd been defeated in the most embarrassing manner there was. Is this a championship, really? I don't think you should participate in a championship competition. You're only demeaning the meaning of the word championship. At this moment, Jack's words reached Dingo's ears, telling him that everything was true. Is this a championship, really? I don't think you should participate in a championship competition. You're only demeaning the meaning of the word championship. At this moment, Jack's words reached Dingo's ears, telling him that everything was true. Jack didn't shout out his words, and only Dingo heard him. Although he thought that way, if he said it loud, he was sure that someone would take it as a provocation. As a result, he would have to deal with a few more annoying flies and would be forced to put into action FSP. It wasn't that Jack didn't want to earn more money. It was just that he still had other things to handle, and there was no reason to bulk work on his head. Jack turned and gazed at the dazed host. Then, upon seeing that he wasn't announcing the end of the match, he asked, "Have I won?" "Host." It was only after a moment that the host finally nodded. He looked at Jack, and upon seeing that Jack's gaze was still on him, he couldn't help but ask on a shaky voice, anything? You haven't announced the results yet." Jack was speechless at the host's behavior, but after looking around, he noticed that it seemed that it wasn't just the host, but the spectators as well. They were currently staring at him and Dingo, who was still dazed, with blank expressions on their faces. He wondered what had happened. He had simply played with Dingo a few times before deciding to end the match. In the end, the way that he'd won had made the crowd quiet. The moment that Jack decided to humiliate Dingo, he had planned on this. Surrendering before the fight was one of the most shameful means of losing in such a competition. But if your opponent was far stronger, there was nothing wrong with admitting defeat. But there was one that was shameful no matter if your opponent was strong or weak. That was being thrown out of the ring. This was shameful as it showed that you couldn't even maintain standing in the ring with the opponent and was pushed to the edge. What was even more shameful was to throw oneself out of the ring, just like what Dingo had done. Although it was under the influence of Jack, at the end of the day, he had jumped out of the ring without anyone touching him. What's more, he had been defeated even though Jack never attacked, not even once. This, when added to his boasting words at the start, it surely would be a huge blow to Dingo. The moment that Jack reminded that he hadn't announced the results yet, the host finally understood that there was a duty of his that he'd not carried out. He rushed to the stage as excitement appeared on his face. The moment that he got to the center of the ring, he shouted. Dingo was kicked out of the ring by J.K. Silver. For this round, J.K. Silver wins and proceeds to the second round of the preliminaries. On the other hand, Dingo is eliminated from the competition. Jack, when did I kick him? Normally, after the host announced the results, there would be boisterous cheers from the crowd. But this time, the cheers were only minimal. The reason for this was because most of the people who had placed bets had bet on Dingo winning the match. Now that he'd lost, how were they supposed to celebrate? Celebrate for losing the money that they had thought that would bring them even more? No way that was going to happen. Although the gamblers didn't cheer, there were those that didn't bet. They were cheering as they seemed to have found it funny the way that Dingo, who was arrogant not long ago, had been defeated. There were a few that were cheering even louder as they were the ones that had bet on the dark horse, trying their own luck. Although most of them had placed a small stake, they still won something and this made them happy. Furthermore, they could still brag about it in front of their friends. Ha ha ha, did you see that? I told you that he would win. I thought someone told me that this wasn't a novel, but it seems that the MC is right there in the ring. So what? He was just lucky that Dingo jumped out of the ring. Why don't you go down there and try your luck and let's see how lucky you are? I think this is all a prank. They must be playing with us so that they could get our money. That's right, we bet on that Dingo, only for him to lose in such an embarrassing way. There were different discussions from the crowd. Everyone had their own opinion about this match. But at the end of the day, even if this match was rigged, there was nothing that they could do about it. After all, this wasn't their first time here. They had already seen the situation where those who dared to make such claims in front of the big bosses were crippled. From that moment, nobody dared to shout something like that. But again, there were several times that they had won the bets that they had placed. So, to know if the match was rigged, they would just have to wait for Jack's next match. What the heck was Dingo doing in the ring? Was he even serious about fighting? Damn it, I just lost my $500,000 just like that. What's $500,000? I lost $2 million on that idiot. Just wait, I'm going to teach him a good lesson after tonight's competition is over. I just made a bet worth $5 million and they were lost in such a stupid way? I want to kill someone. Who's the one that said that Silver is a newbie? Does that look like a newbie to you? Stop being unreasonable. Didn't you see that Silver was formidable? In the VIP room, shouts of anger could be heard. As big shots were here, the bets that they placed were worth a good amount of dollars. Although it was a trial one, and they didn't dare to place something that they couldn't afford to lose, they still won't accept having their hard-earned money being thrown away in such a stupid way. Edwin, you and Linus aren't good people. Did you plot something with that Dingo and Silver? As the others were still cursing and lamenting, Austin looked at Edwin and Linus as he asked. Of all the people that had placed their bets in this round, the two were the only ones that had won. Furthermore, he too had placed a bet of $3 million that Jack would surely lose. If Jack lost, not only would he earn some dollars from the bet, he would also win the bet between Jack and him. But now, he had not only lost the bet, but he'd also began having bad premonitions about the bet that he'd made with Jack. But There was nothing that he could do other than making do with what he had and pray that he would make Jack lose. Although he was confident that Jack wouldn't win the championship, there was no harm in taking precautions. Previously, he had sent Scarred Tiger to make trouble for Jack and, if possible, injure him before the match. But it turned out that the plan hadn't succeeded as Jack had come to the ring in perfect condition. "Your mother. Since when did your dog eyes see me making such shady deals? If you did something, stop throwing blames on others," Edwin retorted. Currently, he was in a very good mood. It seemed that Jack was his lucky star. After all, not only had he purchased the company from his hands, he had also made him win extra $250 million. Now, he was regretting not having placed a higher stake. Otherwise, he would surely have won a lot. But he could do that in the next round that Jack was going to fight. "Why you?" Austin pointed his finger at Edwin as he almost burst with anger. Though, he was quite guilty as he thought that Edwin had found out his plan as he had indeed planned on doing something. "So what if you know? There's nothing that you can do about it. Now that the fighters are in the locker room and we're not allowed to enter or contact them, it's obvious that Scarred Tiger will do it. Then, let's see what you'll do after that brat loses." Austin thought to himself as he decided to ignore Edwin. "You surely got a good seedling," Linus said as he let out a sigh. "What do you mean?" Edwin asked in confusion. "Stop playing dumb, will you? I know that you've gotten that kid over there to help you win some cash from betting, right?" Linus chuckles as he replied. "You've gotten it all wrong, Linus. With my status, I'm not eligible to hire him to do something for me personally." Edwin shook his head as he smiled bitterly. Linus frowned as he asked, "What do you mean? He's got some good background?" "Maybe more than just background. He seems to have some abilities as well. After all, you can see him in the ring. And one more thing, he's the one that has just bought over my company today." The moment that Linus heard these words, it was like an explosive had been set off in his mind. He stared at Edwin wide-eyed as he asked in disbelief, "Are you serious?" "Maybe more than just background. He seems to have some abilities as well. After all, you can see him in the ring. And one more thing, he's the one that has just bought over my company today." The moment that Linus heard these words, it was like an explosive had been set off in his mind. He stared at Edwin wide-eyed as he asked in disbelief, "Are you serious?" "Of course I am. Furthermore, he bought it and paid immediately in full." There was no suspense at all. Edwin felt amused by Linus's reaction. He felt good bragging about Jack. "You mean that he paid billions of dollars on the spot? Didn't you just decide to sell that company of yours just 2 weeks ago?" If he knew about it 2 weeks ago, to be able to collect over $3 billion in just 2 weeks, he must have a terrifying background. Linus muttered with shock written on his face. Edwin laughed as he said proudly, "What weeks? He only knew about it yesterday and today. He came to buy it from me." If a stranger heard how Edwin was boasting, he would think that Jack was his son. Linus was not the only one that was shocked by Edwin's words. Since Austin was seated next to the two, he obviously heard that Jack was rich. And from his ability to be able to gather billions within a day, it was a sure bet that he was richer than he was. As he thought how he was talking about Jack being a fighter that had been bought over by Edwin, he couldn't help but shiver. Now, he could understand why Edwin referred to Jack as Mr. It wasn't that his standards had fallen. It was just that his standards had risen as Edwin had never called him Mr. before. But at the end of it all, he simply thought of a situation where Jack lost the bet. So, it seemed that he didn't need to worry about Jack not being able to keep his far end of the deal. Jack got back into the locker room under the gaze of thousands of pairs of eyes. But his expression never changed at all. It wasn't like winning against Dingo was something big. Currently, he was trying to think if there was a way that he could use to directly reach the finals. After all, the preliminaries were just a waste of time to him. After getting back into the waiting room, he found that the way that the fighters here looked at him had changed. And they seemed to respect him at this moment as nobody came over to disturb him. Jack enjoyed being left alone. If he had come here with his phone, he surely would have began playing games to pass time. It was just that they didn't allow fighters to come in with the communication devices. This would prevent shady deals from happening when the match were happening. After all, although they might make a deal before entering the locker room, there was no way that they could know who they were going to fight against. Jack now had decided to sleep and not waste his time watching the boring fights. After all, he didn't think that there was a person that could compete with him. The only one that aroused part of his curiosity was definitely Mad Lion. But even so, Jack wasn't much interested. As he slept on his seat, he ignored the others that were called on stage to fight or were watching the matches on the screen that had been projected in the locker room. About 2 hours later, just when he was getting bored, the first preliminary round ended. Jack was finally called to the stage after the second match of the second round. The fight was simple as this time. Jack didn't want to waste too much time. He simply attacked as soon as the match began. He threw a kick towards the opponent that wanted to charge towards him. This opponent wasn't prepared for Jack to go on offense as soon as the match began. From Jack's previous match, he had thought that Jack wouldn't be active just like before. But it seemed that he had been greatly mistaken. So, the only thing that he could do was to try and block the attack. So, he raised both of his arms in front of him in order to block the kick.
Bang!
Boom! The moment that Jack's foot connected with his raised arms, the guy was sent flying backwards before hitting the ground. With Jack's precise control over his strength, he had made sure that the force of the impact was enough to knock the guy out but not to badly injure him. The host and the spectators were surprised by the scene. They hadn't expected that Jack was this strong. Strong enough to knock out a good fighter with a single attack. The other fighters that were watching immediately held in their breaths at this moment. They couldn't help but shiver at the thought that they were going to face Jack. Furthermore, they had just mocked him for wearing a mask. They praised themselves for not making trouble for him during the past 2 hours. Otherwise, they surely would have suffered a lot. The crowd cheered for Jack as this time. They had learnt their lessons as most of them had bet on Jack winning the fight. From now on, Silver is going to be my idol. He's so strong. Just look at him. Just a single attack and he defeated an opponent. Who was that shouting loudly that he had rigged the match with Dingo? Come out right now and let me scorn you. Heh, so what if he won just now? It's not like he's the strongest fighter here, right? Right your head. When have you seen another fighter winning the match by using a single attack? Hey Dark Horse, why are you crying? Shouldn't you be jumping up and down after winning the bet? I lost the bet. Sob asterisk sob asterisk. How did you lose the bet when you bet on Silver? Who told you that I bet on Silver? Why you didn't? Of course not. How can I be called Dark Horse if I bet on the popular guys that are expected to win? Guys, where's that person that said that this isn't a novel where the MC is overpowered and wins in his first debut? Come and let me see how confident you are about what you said. Kaya, I can't believe that I'm in a novel. Where's the author? I want to thank him for giving me this chance to appear in the novel. Get lost. You're trying to look for the author when you're just an ignorable side character? I'm sure that the author doesn't even know your name. Why do you care? It's not like you're not happy to be in a novel, right? You too. Stop blabbering nonsense there. What novel? Do you see that I'm made of ink or letters? If you're inside a novel, don't bring me in. Now, who mentioned you? Do you even have the qualifications to appear in a novel? The crowd chattered about as they were mostly excited. On the other hand, the VIP room was active at this moment. I never thought that he was this fierce. Although he's not that bulky, he sure has a lot of strength in those muscles of his. Ha ha ha, I won again. I have recovered all the money that I lost in the previous match. As they were chattering, a middle-aged man entered the room. The moment that they saw him, those that were laughing immediately stopped as they respectfully gazed at this man. He was Calvin, the manager of the Ultimate Arena. He was a manager, but still, they gave him a lot of respect. Of course, that wasn't because of his strength. It was mainly due to the fact that he had a strong backing. The real owner of the arena was a big figure that they couldn't offend. Upon noticing that everyone was paying attention to him, Calvin spoke. J.K. Silver has shown great abilities in the previous matches. As a result, if his next match is like the one that he's just won, he would have the qualifications to continue fighting tomorrow during the semis. In other words, he will skip all the nonsense below and directly participate in the semis together with Mad Lion and Vulture. As for Gibby, he would start from the quarterfinals. The moment that these words were said, the bosses here didn't seem surprised. This was what they had always been doing. Apart from saving time, They would be saving themselves from the losses that came from betting on Jack when he won the matches. After saying his piece, Calvin walked out of the VIP room and went out to meet with Jack. Austin, on the other hand, had his face already pale. After all, he had bet with Jack for 90% of his accumulated wealth. And, although he'd been trying to make things hard for Jack using Scarred Tiger, it seemed that Scarred Tiger hadn't made a move yet. This baffled him. And now, just like heavens favored Jack, he was going to reach the semis as long as he won the next match. Now, the only thing that Austin could pray for was for Scarred Tiger to carry out the plan at this moment, before the next round. Otherwise, he would have to depend on others during the semifinals. Oh, you're already getting scared? Edwin's mocking voice reached Austin from the side.